Man like Mark Sullivan, the Warrior yourself. Stay tuned for the thrilling episode. Woo!
A positive mental attitude can clear away all obstacles which stand between you and your major purpose in life.
This is the Snowboard Project featuring Mark Sullivan and the Bead. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project.
Welcome to the Snowboard Project. I'm Mark Sullivan.
And I am the Beav, and we are coming at you with episode number...
I don't know what episode this is. I'm losing track already.
I know. You're just going to have to check the liner notes for the actual episode number. But today we are interviewing...
Jim O'Leary. Jim O'Leary, does that ring a bell for you?
Son of Timothy O'Leary, the inventor of LSD.
No, that is incorrect. Incorrect, Beav. But here's what I could tell you about Jim. Jim is a guy who got involved with the snowboard industry in Miami, Florida.
Wow, that is definitely not a place you'd think you'd get involved with the snowboard industry. How does that work?
Well, I guess there's a lot of people who like kind of travel out west, travel up north to Vermont and New Hampshire, or whatever. And also, though, there's a lot of people who come from South America, Chile, Argentina, even Brazil, and they buy snowboarding gear in Miami, and they black market back to South America, or gray market it maybe.
Right. So of course this would be happening in Miami, but it's like
the cocaine comes north and like the snowboard
go
gear
south.
Exactly.
It's reverse drug running is what's going on. So the reverse drug runner Jim O'Leary, tell me about Jim's contribution to the snowboard industry.
Okay, so
aside from drug running. Snowboard running.
Okay, so he was selling this gear, and then he was always into Yo Beat magazine. I guess there was like an open call for people to contribute to Yo Beat, and he started writing for Yo Beat. And he was always a passionate snowboarder, but he was writing for Yo Beat while based in Miami. And then he started doing ad sales and a bunch of other jobs. He was involved with Yo Beat for like 4 or 5 years.
That's interesting. So he took basically his passion while being in Miami, working at a snowboard shop, open call for contributors, and was able to snowball that into an actual career with Yo Beat for a few years.
That's right. And like just pursuing your passions, right? He knew what he was passionate about, and he just chased it down. But let's talk about Yo Beat really quickly, because actually I did this interview earlier in the summer, and since I did this interview, Yo Beat has actually shut its doors.
Which is that's really a bummer, I think, for the snowboard industry as a whole and snowboard media.
Yeah.
There were a number of reasons. I think all of us really enjoyed Yo Beat. Why did you like Yo Beat so much?
I just like the fact they were a little bit more kind of unfiltered, a little bit less polished, and a little bit more raw than, let's say, your big time snowboard media. You know?
Sure. They weren't afraid to tackle some issues or talk a little crap, or try and I guess keep the fun in media, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, kind of like rib some people and rack them over the coals every once in a while when they deserved it, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, they just were kind of this voice of this unedited voice in snowboarding, let's say that.
Sure.
And but now they're out of business. They were in business for 22 years. I knew Brick Geary since she was 15. That's when she started. She was 15 years old.
22 years. 22
years, probably almost the longest running. I guess Snowboarder and Transworld have been around longer, but after that, they were pretty much the longest running snowboarding media in America.
That's pretty amazing. Well, should we just roll into this and hear about it from Tim?
Jim.
I'm going to do this from time to time.
I know we make mistakes. We own our mistakes, and then we learn from them.
I called Scotty Lego a skier.
You did. That's way worse. Okay, let's go to Jim O'Leary.
Let's go to Tim O'Leary and Jim O'Leary.
Yeah, Tim O'Leary invented acid?
Yep, Jim O'Leary invented snowboard riding.
Okay, so it's easy to get confused, I guess.
Easy.
Okay. All right, let's go into this interview. Jim O'Leary, formerly of Yo Beat. So on today's the Snowboard Project, I'm going to interview Jim O'Leary, and that is not necessarily a household name unless maybe you're from South America or you've been to Tailgate, Alaska, or you read Yo Beat, in which case you may have come across that name before. So, Jim, tell us a little bit about your background in snowboarding and what you do.
Yeah, so I got into the industry as a shop guy. I started as a part-time and eventually wound up assistant managing a ski and snowboard shop in Miami, Florida, which was an experience. But yeah, since then I've moved back north where humans are meant to live, living in Boston now, doing some freelance copywriting, doing writing for Yo Beat, and some other writing on the side as well. Also working with Tailgate, Alaska this year.
Cool. So going back to Miami, it seems kind of counterintuitive that there would be a ski snowboard shop in Miami. Do they sell a lot of product in Miami?
Yeah, it's a surprising amount of product actually, because it's a two-sided industry down there. In North American winter, you have the Miami locals, which are all flying out to Colorado, and none of them own any cold weather apparel or understand cold weather apparel. Like they can't get it through their heads that you need to put clothes on. They so many times we'd have people coming in asking for like downhill racer skin suits. I'm like, oh, they look so good on the Olympics. I'm like, yeah, but we don't carry those and no one does. You'll freeze. And it didn't occur to them. Like they saw, oh, Olympians are wearing these at the Winter Olympics. They must be warm. Like they're not processing the fact that no, Lindsey Vohn's just really cold. It's like she only wears that as for the brief time going downhill, and then she puts real clothes on. So that was the North American winter, was getting them to understand putting on clothes and going somewhere where it's cold.
What is cold weather in Miami like? Like, what would be like the coldest day of the year in Miami, just to put it in perspective?
We would get lucky. Probably about 1 week every winter, there'd be a week where the low temperature would get down to 77. Yeah, it's and the locals lose their mind when it happens. I remember my wife and I going out for a run, and we were excited. We were like, wow, it's not 100 degrees with 100% humidity. And we were out running, still too warm, and there were locals wearing down jackets and gloves and hats because of how cold it was. Like, it's just not in their experience to understand weather that isn't sweltering hot.
So how do you explain that to them? Like, how do you get them to the point where they understand it's going to be 30 degrees? And then how do you brace them for, like, the fact that there's snow, the fact that it's, like, you could freeze to death if you pass out in a snowbank? I mean, what do you tell them as a shop guy in Miami?
A lot of it is just kind of explaining basic fundamentals that anyone who's lived in cold weather understands, like wear layers, avoid cotton. You want to wear a hat. Like, just really basic fundamentals was really all it was. And if I'd been slightly less scrupulous, it would have been real easy to just prey on their fears and just like, no, you need to buy everything. You need to buy everything in the store in order to not die. But the reality is, most of them were going to luxury resorts like Vail. They were going to Park City. Like, they weren't. It's not like these people were going on extreme backcountry survival scenarios. Like, they were never getting off a blue slope. They were going to go out for a half hour at a time, and it was the experience for them. It was never about survival. It was about managing comfort. Right. So.
And getting out of their comfort zone a little bit, right? They had to get out of their comfort zone, and that was the experience. Exactly. Gotcha.
Exactly. So that was the Miami customer, but then we had a couple months off, and then it became South American season, and we would have people from Argentina and Brazil fly to Miami, buy full setups, and fly back because it's cheaper and better stuff than they were able to get in their domestic market.
What, they don't import like the good gear to Argentina or to Chile or something? They don't have the same quality?
A lot of what it is all of the vendors tailor their product to the market they're going to be selling it in. So the South American market addresses the reality that the disposable income down there isn't what it is up here. So a lot of their stuff is more affordable, but in order to hit that price point, they're cutting a lot of the technology that we have out of it. So it's basic, just polyfill insulated stuff. It's just plastic lining for waterproofing. And that's it. I mean, in that market, it's amazing because they can sell it for 50 pesos, and it's great. But
so like a brand you're familiar with, like Burton or the North Face or something like that, they actually have a different product line, a different catalog that they show in those South American countries.
Absolutely, and that works in that market because that's what people can afford, and they're getting. It's trying to address the market needs, but Argentina, Chile, you have serious mountains, and you have people from those places getting out there in those serious mountains, and they want higher end stuff, and it's easier and cheaper for them to fly to Miami to get it than it is to try and find something that works at an affordable price down there. It's a weird market. It was definitely an experience.
So you must speak fluent Spanish then to deal with people flying up from there.
I have very specific, very unuseful in any other industry Spanish. I've got colors, I've got articles of clothing, and I've got numbers. So I can tell them what it is. They can ask me for a certain color, and I can tell them what price it is. That and food is about all I picked up in Miami. I screwed up in high school and took German. It was Spanish would have been much more useful.
Yeah. So how do you say Gore-Tex in Spanish?
Gore-Tex. Most brands are the same.
That was a trick question. Okay, so then you moved back up to Boston, and you're a copywriter now by trade. Who do you copyright for?
I have a couple of clients. My biggest one is it's actually still the ski snowboard shop I work for in Miami. I'm still working with them doing a lot of their copy for online retail.
Okay, so do they compete like on online retail with like backcountry.com or places like that, or are they more like specific to kind of the Miami market where, you know, maybe the look is maybe more important than the function, I'm guessing?
No, they're definitely more powerful. They have locations all over Florida, and they're definitely biggest in the Florida market, but they're also the largest snow retailer in the Southeast, and the SIA Southeast region is massive. It's all of Texas, all the way across to North Carolina. It's a huge section of the country, and there's some legitimate snow areas in there. Like Western North Carolina has resorts and has a snow culture that people aren't necessarily paying attention to.
Yeah, I've been to Ski Beach, and I've been to Snowshoe, West Virginia, and a couple of places down Sugar Mountain. You know,
Sugar's surprisingly good.
So where would you go when you were living in Miami as a snowboarder? What's the lowest hanging fruit to get involved? Like to hit the snow?
If you're trying to drive, North Carolina is the only option. That's about a 15, 16-hour drive.
Oh, okay.
But that was the weird thing, is it made more sense to fly, and that's why so much of our local customers, so many of them were focused on Colorado and Utah, because if you're planning this vacation months in advance, which you usually are if you're buying plane tickets, you're going to go to Colorado. It's not the best snow. They're not the best mountains, but they always have snow. So we actually saw when Salt Lake and when Tahoe had those rough years a couple of years back, we actually saw a downturn in business because people were canceling vacations, and it was affecting us directly.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. But no, me personally, I'd usually just fly. I'd go back to PA, ride with my brother.
Yeah, because it's having fun with your friends that matters, and if your brother's your friend, which most people's family are friends too, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So
no, and it worked out well because I could just crash on Mom's couch. So.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, so what brands anyway would be like the popular brands for that market? I'm just curious, just to find out for myself, really.
In snowboarding, it was pretty much Burton or bust.
Okay.
They've got the brand outreach that no one else does. we could have a conversation about where their product is, but their brand outreach is second to none, and that extends all the way down to Patagonia. They know who Burton is in Tierra del Fuego. I could try and sell them something from Neversummer, from Arbor, from Capita, from anyone else that we carried, but they'd rather get something from Burton.
Interesting. So basically, the people who were flying up from South America were doing it to buy Burton gear, head to toe.
Pretty much. From non-snowboarding brands, we carried North Face, and they saw a lot of traffic. We started carrying Patagonia while I was there, and that was starting to catch on down there.
Mm-hmm.
But in snowboarding, Burton was pretty much what they cared about.
Interesting. So have you ever gone down there to ride? Have you ever kind of flipped the script and gone from Miami to South America to kind of check out the scene?
Not yet. It has been on my to-do list. It is going to happen, but it has not happened yet. I have mapped out where I want to go, but I have not put together the right crew yet. Let's put it that way.
Okay. And having the right crew really matters, especially, they have backcountry areas there where it's like you really are putting your life into the hands of the people you're with, so you better have a good crew if you're going to ride that kind of stuff, Exactly. And that's what, in talking to people, my plan is to go to Chile. That's the route I want to go. And just talking to those guys, and the infrastructure down there is not what it is here. Mm-hmm. And that applies for on-resort stuff. Like, they're working with much, much older lifts. They're working with much older technology. But even in the backcountry, it's not the support, it's not the rescue infrastructure. Even somewhere as far-flung as Alaska is better supported than you have trying to find help in the Andes. It's much more self-supported and much higher stakes if you make a mistake down there. So if you are backcountry skiing there, you would recommend having a guide or a helicopter kind of at your disposal, so if something does go wrong, that you can affect a rescue a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of doing your homework. If you stay near a resort, your chances are much better than if you're going out there. Because once you get too far, I wouldn't go without a guide. I'll put it that way. It'd be straight up irresponsible, because these aren't mountains that have generations of backcountry skiers and snowboarders collecting data on. These are mountains that only a few people are riding, because the local scene isn't out there yet, and imports from Europe and North America aren't getting down there. So it's not the same level that you're used to up here.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, I really hadn't, taken that fully into account anyway, because it's like you just see photos from Chile or Argentina, and it looks like the mountains are like jagged and gnarly and awesome, for backcountry riding. But really, it's like, okay, did you bring your sat phone? You might want to have one of those if you're down there in the backcountry.
Exactly. And again, this is all based on hearsay on my part. If someone in Cerro Catedral is listening to this and getting angry at what I'm saying, I own that I haven't been there. I'm
right. But you know what? I mean, I think that's good to just let people know you have to do your research. You don't just assume that because you can afford to go there that you're just going to have this wicked backcountry powder experience without really planning a little bit more than you would, say, if you're going to ride the backcountry in Colorado or Utah or Alaska even,
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, let's switch gears here for a minute. You're also involved with YoBeat. How did you get involved with Brooke? How did you get involved with YoBeat?
It's an overlapping story, actually, because I got in touch with Brooke. I knew I wanted to write. I said, I want to write, and so we talked back and forth for a while, and eventually my first assignment at YoBeat is I did a regular column from a shop guy's perspective. This was probably 6 years ago now. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's basically, I shot Brooke an email and said, I want to write, and it's grown from there.
And then she said, hey, it doesn't pay. And you said, okay. And then she said, you're hired.
Pretty much.
That's the way it works in media at the grassroots level, right? It's more about getting the experience than getting paid. I mean, if you're out there, and I have a media background myself, and it's like if you're out there with the idea that like this is like a meal ticket, you've got the wrong idea. You have to pay a lot of dues to get to the point, and to get the chops even to be a good enough writer to make that work, to make money doing it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. That's part of what I really appreciated is what the opportunity that I was given at YoBeat is. Yeah, it was an unpaid position, but so much of writing is just getting it out, just putting words down, and you're gonna hate the first 100 things you write.
Yeah.
So you need to write those first 100 things before someone else will like it.
That's really true. It really is because it's like. And I bet writing now comes easier for you that you've put in yourself against deadlines, and you have to churn out a volume of content, both for your job, for YoBeat, and for other things. It's like it really takes a while to get to that point. Let me ask you a question. How many words in total did you have to write that were published or used for something before writing started becoming easier for you? Right, before it actually started coming to you, instead of you having to like rip up the draft, the picture of the gumshoe reporter with his like wastebasket overflowing with drafts, How long did it take to get comfortable with writing?
I mean, probably in words or articles, a lot. I can't even begin to fathom, but I've probably only started really liking what I've been writing probably in the last 2 years, and even then, if I come back to something 2 months after writing it, I'm like, oh, I could have done this so much better. That's in any creative profession. You're always your harshest critic, so you're always going to be picking apart what you're liking. So I've been really happy with some of the stuff I've put together, even in the last 3 months. It's probably some of my strongest work, but there's still a lot that I wish I had done better, and a lot that I just wish I'd done differently. I think if you do get to a point where you are just happy with what you're doing, you're not getting any better. You've peaked. You're done, and I hope I don't get to that point at any time.
Right. It's kind of that idea that that I hold near and dear to my heart, which is Kaizen, which is constant improvement. And, for me as a snowboarder, it was like, at first I was trying to learn tricks, and go 180, 360, 540, 720, or whatever, doing like harder and harder variations of tricks. But then I figured out that like I could apply that to writing, publishing, sales, all different aspects of snowboarding. Really it's like that you can apply that same methodology of like wanting to progress yourself, and really there being no upper limit. And I would say mentally it's actually much longer term than it is through athletics. Like now I'm an old buzzard, right? And so it's harder. I have to work hard. I actually work out now and stretch a lot and do things like that just to be able to once a year go back to the perfect conditions and then be like, okay, I got the shot to improve again. It takes a lot more though to do it with athletics than it does like writing, let's say, as far as like you're not putting your brain isn't gonna break if you write a bad story, No. If anything, your brain breaks because you've written too many good stories. There are definitely Wednesday is a big deadline day for a couple of my clients, so it's not fun. On that day, I'm pretty much hammering away on my computer from when I get up, usually until around 8 or 9 o'clock, and it gets to you after a while. Like you lose the ability to articulate outside of that medium. You keep hammering away at it, and it affects your ability to think like a normal person. Right, it's because you're obsessed with this idea that the deadline's coming and I gotta finish this, so I might as well have that going on the hamster wheel all the time.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so do you have any kind of process when you get a new assignment, when you have a story to write, a deadline approaching? Do you have a process like of how you kind of formulate your story, or does it come like a lightning bolt, or is there some kind of methodology that you use to be able to meet that deadline?
The deadline is rarely the challenge for me because yes, I'm almost always up against one, but that's just a grind. You smash the keyboard enough times, and eventually it'll get there. The challenge for me in writing is always figuring out how to frame everything, what point of view to take, because especially for snowboard stuff, there are so many people that are paying attention and interested in snowboarding. There's a million opinions out there, but 900,000 of them are the same. It's finding the opinion that isn't the same, that isn't something someone else could have said, that isn't something someone's read 100 times before. That is always the crux for me, is finding something that's interesting to read, because that's what's interesting to write. Because if it's not interesting to read, it's either nothing new or it's not important.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about important ideas. What are some of like the important ideas that you're proud of that you've worked on as far as like writing stories in the media? Like which ones come to the top of the list as far as like this had to be done, this had to be said?
It's okay. You're not taking any sponsors on this, right?
Nope, none at all.
Okay, good. So Ruroc helmets, I have a long-standing personal feud with them.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
And for anyone who's listening who isn't familiar, they are the cheesiest, goofiest, full-face snowboard helmets that no one asked for. And they use this over-the-top marketing bravado. I remember a few years back, they ran this Facebook ad that was a picture of Haldor, and the caption said, "If I wore helmets, I'd wear Ruroc," which Haldor didn't say. Like, that didn't happen, but that's always been their approach, is do these things to get attention and then take it down when someone catches them. And it's been an ongoing feud that I've had with them. I don't know if there was a British snow blog a while back, Illicit Snowboarding, and they had a similar ongoing feud with them. It's still online if anyone wants to look for it. And eventually I just got sick of it, and someone asked part of one of the columns I did for Yobi was a Ask a Shop Guy column. Basically, people could send in questions, and I'd bloviate my intentionally unimportant opinions about them. But the one that continues to get the most traffic is me talking about how stupid those helmets are and how they're solving problems no one is having and creating problems no one needs. And it's...
What are the problems that it creates? What's the problem that a helmet creates?
So it's a unified helmet and goggle package. You can only use Ruroc helmets with Ruroc goggles. And it's perfectly sealed around the face and around the goggle.
Uh-huh.
But unlike a snowmobile full face helmet, there's no breath guard. There's nothing directing your breath away from the goggles. So basically, it's just funneling all this hot, wet air up into your goggles, creating fog. It doesn't. That's not a good idea. And it's not a moto or a snowmobile full face has structural integrity to the face. That's what it's there for. It's to protect your lower face. This is a piece of plastic. They've done testing showing how durable it is, but it's a standard snow helmet strap, so it's not secured to protect that angle. That's not what it's designed for. So it's merely an appearance piece that fogs your goggles and locks you into a proprietary goggle setup, so you have to keep buying their product. It's doing that to get you a goofy looking helmet.
You look like Darth Vader, right? Is that you're supposed to look like intimidating or something, or you're supposed to look macho, or have some kind of mystique by your look that your ability might not connote on the slope, because obviously if it's not that functional, good snowboarders are probably going to gravitate away from it, not towards it.
Right, and that's the other thing. It's they're marketing specifically away from core, which I'm not saying everything in snowboarding needs to be about core snowboarders, because it's not. Core snowboarders are the tiniest minority in the entire industry, and as much as it hurts us to say this, the world doesn't revolve around us. It doesn't. They sell way more product to non-core snowboarders than they will ever sell to core.
Yep.
But it's these helmets are designed to lead people down the wrong path. It's not making things better. It's not making things safer. It's just look at how cool I look, and that's an untenable position from someone who's made a career out of not being cool.
Oh man, so if you're listening in from Rock right now, you do have fans probably, but not necessarily among people who are core snowboarders.
And I mean, I've definitely had conversations with people that wear the helmets, and do what makes you happy.
Sure.
But if that's what makes you happy, no, I'm laughing at you.
Right. And so are they like investing in having like a sponsored team or anything like that? I mean, or is it just like Facebook ads?
Not to mind. Yeah, they're really heavily invested in social. The article that I wrote sending them up is still on YoBeat. They've contacted us numerous times trying to get us to take it down. And only recently were they able to get it off their first page of Google results when you searched Rock helmets. I think we're down to page 3 now, so they've invested heavily in search engine optimization to get us off their front page.
Did they offer to advertise with YoBeat in order to get that article down? Did they offer? Yeah. They offered to advertise actually.
Yeah, they offered to advertise. Well, no, first they offered us free helmets, which. I feel like I made my opinion of these helmets abundantly clear. I'm not sure how that would help.
Yeah.
I don't want one.
Yeah.
But yeah, they offered advertising, but we decided against it. It's even with the financial realities of independent snowboard media, it wasn't a compromise we were willing to make.
Are there any other brands that you're unwilling to take advertising from, despite the fact that it's challenging to run independent snowboarding media, at a grassroots level?
Unwilling? I don't think so. There's definitely some bridges that have been burnt on either side, but there's not anyone. If a bridge has been burnt, we're happy to build a new one. But if you're there for the right reasons, if you're advertising if you're trying to make snow better, we're on the same team, so there's no point in fighting.
Hey, what's up? If you like what you're hearing here on the Snowboard Project, please consider donating to us on patreon.com/the Snowboard Project. Every week you get to hear me and Mark.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, Mark's there.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Patreon.com/the Snowboard Project. Do it.
Patreon.com/the Snowboard Project.
I was really trying to be serious there. So.
Oh, sorry. At a certain point, you also transitioned from just writing for YoBeat, your column, the shop. Is that what it's called, the shop guy? What was it called?
Yeah. This was 6 years back. I think it was Shop Guy Rants or something. I don't fully remember.
But then you transitioned to also selling advertising for them. How did you make that transition? YoBeat's long-term ad guy left, and this was actually as I was moving out of Miami. I was moving to Georgia, which was a big improvement. But I was leaving Miami. I was leaving the shop that I was managing, and needed more work. I have sales experience. I actually, right out of college. It's funny you mentioned Kaizen earlier. I sold Toyotas for 3 years out of college. And so I have sales background. I hated that industry, but I enjoyed working with people, and I enjoyed putting together things that worked for both parties. So it kind of transitioned pretty naturally from writing for YoBeat to handling marketing, advertising, and brand partnerships. Wow, that's a big title.
Yeah, it's very expensive. I have to get extra large business cards. It's
Right, and T-shirts with extra large holes at the collar, so you can take them on and off every day, right?
Yeah,
it's very heady stuff.
No, you're making that joke, but that is a problem I have. I do have an extremely large head, which runs into problems, including Ruroc didn't make a helmet big enough for me. So, in addition to being bad helmets, they're discriminatory against my people.
Have you ever tried a V-neck? Just kidding.
I have. I don't have the confidence for that. I will confess to that.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about like selling advertising. I mean, what's the process behind like establishing a partnership that works for both sides, for both Yobi and for the advertiser, so everyone wins? Yeah,
I mean that's really where it is for me. Is it's finding something that works for both of us. Mm-hmm. A lot of brands, something that Yobi does really, really well with is up and coming and smaller brands. Like we had a campaign with Death Label Snowboards out of Japan last year, and they have limited impact in the English speaking world because Japan, it's hard to get that outreach from there. You can be a large and present force in the Japanese market and by extension Australia, but it's hard to make that transition into North America where we think we have everything that matters and everything we need to know. So I was talking to Taco back and forth for a couple weeks, figuring out what his needs were, what he had to work with, and we built out a package that we gave them a whole lot of social promotion this year. We did a big giveaway with one of their riders, PJ Gustafson, and it was really about just figuring out what their needs are and what is missing from what they are already bringing to the table. We don't need to give them, if someone already has a robust social media presence, we can definitely signal boost, but that's not helping them as much as we can help them in other ways. So it's really about identifying what the customer's needs are and figuring out how we can help fix those needs.
Right. So do you approach writing stories and selling advertising in a similar way, or is it kind of like apples and oranges?
They're definitely related in that it's about finding the gaps. It's about finding where something isn't being done, whether that's writing a story that someone else isn't writing, or whether that's this brand needs a board review so people know who they are. It's a similar thought process in that it's about finding what isn't already being done.
Mm-hmm. I see. So there is that kind of crossover between the two, as far as like you're solving problems that or identifying problems basically, and
right.
looking for that blue water that hasn't been sailed yet. You know.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. So let's shift gears again a little bit. Let's talk about how you got involved with the ski and snowboard industry. It sounds like you had to no one opened the doors for you to get in. You opened the doors for yourself. So let's talk about that.
Right. Yeah. And I got into the snowboard industry through Miami. I'm probably if there's literally anyone else that has done that, please, Jim@yobi.com. I want to talk to you because I think I'm the only one. I think I'm the only one here.
In this conversation, for sure.
Right. No, but it's a weird way to get into the industry, to grow up in Pennsylvania, a half hour from the Poconos, but get into the industry through Miami. It's weird, but that's how I got in. I honestly moved down there. I also mountain bike, and I was like, oh well, I'm gonna move to Miami, and this was when I left the car business. Actually, I hated that job. I hated doing it. I hated the hours, and knew I needed a change. So my thinking was to move into the mountain bike industry. There's a surprisingly good mountain bike scene in South Florida.
Despite
and I was like,
mountains.
This is going to be my... Just no mountains. There's no climbing in South Florida, but an amazing group of riders. They're just really committed to working with what they have. That some of the best maintained and best laid out trails I've ever ridden are in South Florida.
Huh.
It's unbelievable what they're able to do with 2 acres of flat down there. It's really impressive. I'm not saying it should be on anyone's destination mountain bike trip.
Right.
But if you're down there and looking to burn an afternoon, Amelia Earhart Park is unbelievable for what they're given to work with.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, so I went down there looking to get into the bike industry, but then I also realized I needed to get, I wanted to get my board waxed because I brought my board with me to Florida. In retrospect, that was a curious decision, but I brought it with me, and I was like, I need to get this thing waxed before the edges rust off. So I was like, can anyone wax a snowboard in Miami? And this was while I was looking for jobs. I looked that information up, found a ski snowboard shop that was within reasonable driving distance of where we were living. And while they were my third stop. I stopped at 2 bike shops before getting to the ski snowboard shop I wound up working at. And I had the resumes in the car, so I was like, I'll drop one off, see if they're hiring. And then I got in and went from there. I didn't plan it this way.
But you had a passion for snowboarding prior to doing that, so it was one of your passions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
right. Yeah. It was that. Go ahead.
No, you finished your thought. I've got another question.
No, I'm ready for another question. So
okay. So maybe you can address this idea of doing what you love is more important than making money. I imagine if you're a good Toyota salesman, you can make decent money doing it, but yet you weren't getting that same gratification that you were looking for. Somehow that came to a dead end as far as like being happy with what you were doing.
Yeah, and I really hit a brick wall. I was at Toyota for 2 years. I was okay. I was still new. I was learning, but I was doing okay. And I started really focusing on figuring out how to be a better salesperson without resorting to the old school, what can I do to get you in a car today kind of bullshit that everyone expects car salesmen to go with. And I started focusing on that, and I was getting decent at it. I wasn't good by any stretch of the imagination, but I was getting decent. But then I had my best month in the car business. I sold 20 cars, and that was the national average for car salesmen is 12 cars a month. I sold 20 cars that month, and I was like, I've got this. I figured it out. I'm going to put this together. But doing that, I was working 80-hour weeks. I was working open to close 5 days a week. I was exhausted all the time. I wasn't doing anything else I wanted to do. And I noticed that the successful car salesman, the one next to me, the ones next to me, there were a lot of great people at that store, but they were 50, 60 years old, working the same hours I was, doing nothing else. And yeah, when I was 22 and needed money and had nothing better to do, so sure, yeah, I can work an 80-hour week, but just the idea of doing that every week for the rest of my life, it just completely shut me off. The next month I sold 5 cars and they fired me. I realized, like, yeah, you can do this, but I looked at how much I was going to have to give up to do it, and yeah, they fired me. To be fair, they fired me from sales and moved me down to the service department, and I was a service advisor for a few months, but this was also while my wife's job was moving down to Miami, so we knew we were leaving. So that was basically just filling time until we left. So it made me realize how important it was to like what you were doing, because I was okay at selling cars. I probably could have been good at it, but I hated doing it. And however good the money wasn't worth what I was giving up to get it.
Right, and when you went to Miami, it's not like you went to every car dealership and said, okay, here, I'm an experienced car salesman. I can sell Toyotas. I could probably sell Nissans or whatever. You didn't do that, did you?
No, I moved, when we moved to Miami, I gave myself 3 months. I was like, if I can't find a job I like, I'll go back to car sales and keep looking, but I'm not going to I'll go back to car sales and keep looking for other work, but I'm going to give myself a chance to do something else first. And yeah, that's when I got the job it was my first week looking for jobs. I got the job at the ski snowboard shop.
Okay, so do you see any crossover? Do you ever use any techniques you used in selling cars and used that experience and then translated that to selling snowboard equipment at the ski snowboard shop or to selling advertising on your work? So what are those kind of things that you learned that you use?
One of the big things, and this is all sales in anything, and yet it's amazing how many people don't do it. But anytime you're selling a product, be feature, benefit. It's one thing to say a car has anti-lock brakes. Great. Everything has anti-lock brakes. You're not helping me. But when you tell someone, this Toyota Corolla has anti-lock brakes, which prevents the wheels from locking up, so in emergency stopping situations, you maintain control of your vehicle. Now they understand why they care about that, and it translates great. You have a hybrid camber snowboard. Everyone has a hybrid camber snowboard. No one cares. But this one combines the traction and stability of a camber snowboard with the agility and soft snow performance of rocker. And just that kind of approach is definitely translated. Just getting people to understand not what the product has, but understanding what the product has that will help them.
Right. So, okay, here's a question about the car industry, and I guess this will go back to snowboarding. It seems like, when you're in the process of buying a car, there's always this point in time where it's like, okay, let me go run that by my sales manager. Is that an excuse just to try to get the most commission to to push back, or is that is it really in the sales manager's hands whether you can sell the car cheap enough?
It depends dealership to dealership, but I worked at 3 dealerships when I was selling cars, and I spoke to a lot of car salesmen while I was selling cars, and at every single one, the sales manager does actually control the price. Mm-hmm. It's depending on the salesperson's experience and awareness, they may know whether or not a price will sell a car, but at the end of the day, they still have to go and say, we're selling at this price, right? So the go to get a sales manager isn't a joke. It isn't a trick. They actually do have to, even if you're one of those, even if you're one of those unusual people that buys a car without ever talking to a sales manager, the sales manager still knows what the car's been sold at and still has signed off on it. That's the only way the deal moves forward. It's the car salesman's job to make sure you're in the right car. It's the sales manager's job to make sure that you buy it at a price that works for the dealership.
Right. Now, is that like a straight commission or a percentage type commission?
It's dealer to dealer. Some of them do flats. Most of them are on a percentage commission. Mm-hmm. Some of them supplement that with a regular salary on top of the commission. Mm-hmm. But the dealer I had the most success at it was pure commission, and that was where I was most successful. And they were definitely simultaneously the best place to sell a car, and also they were much better to customers than a lot of people. I think those two things were related.
Yeah. So do you have to go back to Brooke when you're making a deal for Yobi? Do you have to be like, let me go talk to my sales manager? Oh, this is never going to work.
It's definitely. I don't make any final decisions, but I also. Our pricing is much more transparent and much more fixed, honestly. Like, there's definitely give and take in what any advertising package with Yobi is going to cost. Mm-hmm. But it's also, you pay for what you get. So if someone's not paying enough to get a thing, they're not getting it, but they know that when I'm discussing that with them. So there's never a surprise, oh no, this isn't enough money to cover this. That hasn't really been a problem.
Okay, so do you also get involved with like collections? Because you make these ad deals, and they get the value as far as that. Do you extend credit, and then do you have to do collections on that as well?
I've always wanted to, but luckily we're pretty selective with our advertisers, and with a significant exception this season, pretty much everyone pays on time and has agreed.
Mm-hmm. So it isn't like this thing where you're basically chasing people down or whatever, which is kind of different for snowboarding media. Most people will sell you dessert before they sell you vegetables, so to speak.
And that's a big part of why we're selective with who we advertise with. If we told an advertiser we're not working with them until they change their marketing agency anymore, because we've had too many problems with their marketing agency. We love the brand. We have a long-established, healthy relationship with them, but we're not working with them this year because they're going through a marketing agency that for 2 years running has refused to pay up on time.
Mm-hmm. I see. So are there other advertisers that like you're like, look, we won't work with you on besides payment grounds, but like on moral grounds, like, okay, you represent this and therefore we don't really align with that in terms of our identity?
Not really.
Like, you take weed industry, like if the weed industry wanted to advertise on Yobeat, would you allow that?
Oh, we absolutely did. We had I'm very disappointed in myself for not remembering their name, but we had a company that makes a vaporizer bong, and they were an advertiser for us last year. It's all good.
It's all good. Okay. Well, do you have any moral conscience about promoting that to kids who might be too young or be in places where that's not legal or anything like that? Is there any moral conundrum in any of that?
I mean, that's we've had many internal discussions about putting a age gate on the site, making it 18 only. Obviously, kids can get around that because I was under 18 and got through those quite easily back in the day. But it's something we talked about. But at the same time, Yes sells a board called the 420, and it's all weed jokes. And
Yeah.
how many snowboards have you seen with weed graphics? How many remember the what was the Burton Playboy board? Why can't I remember the name?
I think it was called the Playboy or something. I think it was it was in partnership with Playboy anyway. It was like a collab or something.
Right. So it's not like good God, if Yobeat becomes the moral arbiter of snowboarding, it's all gone to shit. It's all bad. It's all gone downhill. So we definitely try and keep. We definitely have our editorial standards, and we definitely pretend to take moral stands on all kinds of things. I mean, I ranted for 15 minutes here about helmets.
Yep.
But it's not like we're pretending that everything has to be squeaky clean, that everything has to be just so. We're not the public-facing side of snowboarding. If you found Yobeat, you're already in a little bit, so it's not like we have to maintain any. It's not like we have to make anyone look better than they are.
Right, and it seems like that standard, if it exists, might be more along the lines of authenticity to the sport and not moral grounds, let's say, where you're looking at a larger moral perspective. You're like, is this authentic to snowboarding, or is this somebody who's just coming in to make a quick buck and extract some kind of wealth from snowboarding?
Right, exactly. I mean, just to be clear where I stand on, like, I don't smoke. Like, this isn't a moral thing. It's not a thing that interests me, so I don't. But that doesn't mean I wring my hands and clutch my pearls anytime I see it. Like, it's a thing people are into that I'm not into. That doesn't make it right or wrong. And it's kind of the same way with most other, quote, moral issues in snowboarding. Just because it's not your thing doesn't mean it's the worst thing.
Right. There's a certain amount of freedom that goes with snowboarding hand in hand, and hopefully we can allow that freedom to exist in our sport so people can become individuals and not just become homogenized.
And hopefully people can take that away from snowboarding. Like people, even the twice-a-year snowboarders, if they get that and take that into their regular life, snowboarding has been a net force for good, no matter how many controversial snowboard graphics Lobster puts out.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Beav here. If you're enjoying what you're listening to, please consider donating at patreon.com/the Snowboard Project. You too can help us create an independent voice in snowboard media. We're not sponsored by anyone except you. Patreon.com/the Snowboard Project.
Right, you know. So let me ask you this. So, and I'm going to ask, this might be a tough question, but it's like, when did snowboarding care more about being cool than having fun?
I don't know when it happened, because I got into snowboarding late. I started late. I'm 31. I was of the age where you have to ski first so that you can snowboard. And I went skiing once and hated it and didn't go back to a mountain for a couple of years as a result. So I got into snowboarding late, and by the time I got back to it, it was already too cool for itself. And as a result, it's hard for me to put a finger on when it got too cool, because in my experience, it's always thought it was too cool.
Right. So how do you combat that? I mean, maybe that's one of the stumbling blocks that holds the sport back from growth, or has resulted in a decline or a slight decline in terms of participation. That it's like, hey, you're not cool enough actually to hang out with our crew.
I mean, I really think that it's. I don't think there's anything that, as a whole, we can in the industry can do other than stop glamorizing the anti-skier rhetoric. Like, I have skier friends and we make fun of each other, and that's fine, because even when we're not on the mountain, we're making fun of each other for other stuff. That's different than, like, just slashing a skier who fell over. Like, let them be. You've fallen over too. We're snowboarders. We fall over a lot more than they do. Let them have this. It's fine.
Yeah.
And so, maybe that, but I'm not sure, as an industry, there's much we can do other than stop pretending that. I don't know.
Because I see Yobi as this, this factor. It has a cool factor to it, right? And I think that a lot of it has to do with like the authenticity of like Brooks' involvement in snowboarding media. But I also think that, people see it as cool, and therefore it kind of perpetuates this notion of like, hey, this is what's cool in snowboarding is Yobi.
Yeah, and that's Brooke and I have actually talked about this, and it's not exactly. Neither Brooke nor I think we're terribly cool.
Which makes you actually cool because you're authentic.
Right, and that's kind of the double-edged sword of what we've been dealing with. Is we have these opinions, and it's shocking when people value them.
Yeah.
Like, and this isn't the first time someone's talked about this, is Yobi does make fun of a lot of people for a lot of things, but it's mainly punching up, and it's mainly in-group. Like, the feud with the Don was well established. JP Walker and Yobi had a bit of a tiff a couple of years back.
Yep.
But it wasn't anything. No one actually. We don't care. I don't think he cares. I hope he doesn't care, because that'd be disappointing.
He might care. He might be one that cares. I'm not sure, but
yeah, he might.
But you know what? It's like I was like when Yobi made fun of me. I think it was like over the Sean White 100 or something. Or whatever, and I was the announcer for that. But it's like, man, I really have arrived in snowboarding if Yobi's willing to make fun of me.
Right. We're not The Onion, we're not satire, we're not fake, but that doesn't mean we should be taken as literal gospel and 100% serious. I mean, we shut down the comment section last year because things were getting taken a little bit too seriously. I mean, they're back open again, but the Yobi comment section was an institution for so long, but it just got to be a bit much. So well, calm down and take a breather. It kind of
went like to the right wing, like just personal attacks instead of like thoughtful discourse. Maybe
right. And that's we kind of want to live in the space between thoughtful discourse and like just cheap jokes. Like, that's where we're trying to live. We're not trying to be taken seriously. We're not trying to it's snowboarding. We're grown adults sliding downhill, spending a lot of money doing it. It's all a little ridiculous. Like, let's just have fun and calm down.
Yeah, there are people starving in Africa. Come on, get real.
Right. Yeah, but it's just fun. It's just supposed to be fun. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so just outline kind of what we can expect from YoBeat here in the future. You know, what direction, any changes, anything new coming that's exciting to tune into.
Yeah, no, we are taking a little bit of a soft pivot looking into the season. We're looking to kind of change. YoBeat has a reputation for being where people go to watch park edits, and that's not a space that we want to exactly live in anymore, primarily because YouTube's going to beat us to it, Instagram's going to beat us to it, so...
Right, trying to compete with them is like a losing battle, right?
Right, and that's great. That's where we go to look for the stuff, so we're not helping anyone if we're just reposting stuff that we find. We're obviously still going to run edits, we're obviously still going to run videos, but we're looking to focus more on original content, more written content, video content, whatever. It gets back to what I was saying earlier. What are other people not doing? Other people have park edits covered. They got this. But what isn't existing, especially with the Enthusiast Network merger, is there's not a lot of original, unique content anymore. And so that's the direction we want to go. That's what we want to do more of, because that's what Brooke and I are both passionate about.
And what snowboarding probably needs is just a little bit more independent voice, or just more storytelling, not just clickbaity type stuff that's like, oh look, I reposted this video of Haldor first, so we got 10,000 views. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So that's pretty interesting. So let's say you were to give advice to kids who are like, they're passionate about snowboarding, they're in high school, they want to be involved and do this with their life. How would you go about doing that if you're a kid on the outside looking in?
I mean, the first thing is make sure you have some sort of financial income from something else. Whether it's working another job, whether it's your parents' trust fund, whatever. The reality is you're not getting rich doing this. If you got student loans to pay, this isn't paying it. So that's the first thing, is before you go in on this dream, make sure you can afford this dream.
Right.
But then the other thing is I feel like it's the recurring theme of this conversation, is figure out what you have that someone else doesn't. What are you bringing to the conversation that hasn't been done before? That hasn't. Maybe you're. I mean, people have been filming snowboarding for as long as there has been snowboarding, and yet Gimbal God managed to find a way to do something that caught people's attention and felt different than what other people were doing. That is what needs. You don't need to be the next Gimbal God, but you do need to figure out what you're doing that someone else isn't.
Right, and it's like snowboarding, like the genesis of where it actually got that like exponential growth was like because it was different, because it was different than skiing, different than skateboarding, and it was something that was new. Well, that got old, actually, and it got kind of homogenized, and so to find something different in snowboarding is probably a lot more challenging now than it was 25 years ago, but there still is that open territory to do something different and unique and apply different ideas to the sport and bring something new to the sport.
Yeah, and it's definitely harder because everything in snowboarding is so well documented, and there's history now. There is snowboard history, and so you're up against that. Whereas in the past, if you did something, no one else has recorded anyone doing it, so you're the first one to do it. Great, you're an innovator. And now it's a lot harder to do that because a lot of innovation has happened. But at the same time, it's easier to be focused now. If you look, riders, media outlets, anyone, it's not everyone does everything anymore. There's the park scene, there's street, which is different than park. The fact that is a segmentation now is different even from 5 years ago. Street and park were essentially interchangeable, but now they're separate disciplines. And that's without even talking to getting into backcountry, or Europe still cares about parallel giant slalom, apparently. So that's also a part of the scene that we're not paying attention to. There's a lot of space now because not everyone is doing everything.
Right, and it seems like the niches get smaller and smaller as time goes on. Just like you said with park and street, it's like those were two kind of broad freestyle. You know, there was a time when it was like you're a racer or you're a freestyler in snowboarding.
Exactly.
You know, and that was like just two massive niches, and freestyle won, at least in North America, and I'd say probably globally. But now it's like, how many segments are there of freestyle snowboarding? There's a lot. Half pipe is a segment, you know, that really doesn't cross over with other segments, as our backcountry freestyle. And then there's backcountry like lines, right? So, like where you're Jeremy Jones and you're like really like strategizing lines. It seems like there's a lot more segments now than there were in the past. So what other segments do you see as emerging segments in snowboarding? Is there anything that really hasn't been nailed down yet?
Nailed down? Not. This is the guilty confession time. I am always behind on this type of trend. I am always the last person to find out. You would think, oh, he works for Yobi, he's in tune with everything. No, I'm really not. I'm not actually that cool. So next emerging segment, I really don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, in your defense, you were the first guy from Yobi to go to Alaska.
I've got that going for me. I mean, okay, yeah, maybe backcountry is the answer to that question, but I feel like backcountry was the next big thing 3 years ago.
Yeah, well, it still isn't the big thing because it's so hard to access. I mean, you know, like in my case, like Tailgate Alaska went on for 10 years, and it grew and it shrank, and it ran through this whole course, and it's still going. But you know, it's just hard to access. It's hard to make that leap to actually become a true backcountry rider, because let's face it, like if you're on the East Coast, you're not a backcountry rider. And if you are a backcountry rider on the East Coast, then chances are you're planning on moving west, because it's just that much more accessible out west. You know, you might get, I don't know, 3 or 4 days that are worth hiking, you know, some good line or whatever on the East Coast, but really it's like, you know, in the West, my whole season is built around accessing backcountry terrain, you know. So really, right. it is a pretty small niche, and so, you know, and maybe it'll get smaller or maybe it'll get bigger. I'm not sure. We'll have to see. But I know that the experience anyway is worth it in terms of my own personal progression in the sport. That I can still, at my ripe old age, improve every year, or gives me the opportunity to. I can't say that every year I get better and better, but I still have that opportunity to challenge myself with my mind game in snowboarding more so than my knee game in snowboarding, you know, and so that'll allow me to get better and better, well, for at least another 5 years, you know, I think.
Right.
So, okay, so in summary, let's summarize this. Is there anything that you would do differently with this perspective now of a number of years involved with both the industry, being outside the industry as a consumer? You know, would you do anything differently?
I don't think so. There's maybe a few phone calls I wish I had made. There's maybe a few I wish I hadn't made, but everything works out eventually.
Yeah, and it seems like, though, you were kind of this master of your destiny in terms of you actually opened the doors for yourself. You had to write to Brooke and say, hey, I want to do this. I have a voice that's not represented. So not only did you have a differentiated voice, you actually had to pick up the phone, figure out the number, call the number, and then be persistent enough to break through. And so maybe there's something to be said for persistence as well.
Yeah, and that's persistence definitely enters into it. It's before I got in with Yobi, I applied to an internship at Teton Gravity Research. Didn't get it, But then the next year got an email saying, hey, are you still interested? We'd like to make you this year's intern. And I emailed, I phone called, I kept trying to contact people and never got a response. And that hurt.
Yeah.
I was living in Miami and desperate to get out of Miami. And suddenly I get this lifeline from Wyoming saying, hey, here's this chance. And it never panned out. That was the last communication I heard from them, saying, hey, do you want this job? And then no response. And that hurt, but you got to get back up after something like that, and it's worked out pretty well for me since then.
Nice.
It's like you said, it's persistence.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. We're going to leave it right there because I think that is something that people can really internalize and be persistent. And if you follow your dreams, know that it's going to take more than just the desire to do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
For sure.
Thanks, Jim.
On behalf of Mark Sullivan and the Beeve, thanks for listening to the Snowboard Project. Remember, ride fast, take chances, dream big, and take action. And for God's sake, don't be a pussy. Don't forget to support advertising-free snowboarding media at patreon.com. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project.